In recent weeks, the Trump administration has reaffirmed its commitment to a robust and controversial immigration policy while also pursuing sweeping changes within the federal workforce. These developments have raised significant concerns among advocates for migrant rights and federal employees as the administration pivots towards a harder line reminiscent of its first term. One of the most notable actions has been the reinstatement of stringent requirements for sponsors of unaccompanied migrant children. The Office of Refugee Resettlement announced that all adult members of a household must now be fingerprinted before a child can be released from federal custody. This policy echoes measures from the previous Trump administration and has drawn sharp criticism from immigration advocates who argue that such requirements could lead to increased overcrowding in detention facilities as potential sponsors, often undocumented immigrants themselves, may be deterred from coming forward out of fear of deportation. Lindsay Toxilowski, head of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, expressed concern that the policy is less about child safety and more about discouraging sponsorship, potentially lengthening the time minors remain in government custody. In tandem with these immigration reforms, the Trump administration is also executing drastic cuts to the federal workforce. Reports indicate that around 1,000 employees at the Department of Energy have been notified of their layoffs, with the Internal Revenue Service bracing to let go thousands more in the coming weeks. This sweeping reduction follows directives from the administration aimed at slashing the size of the federal workforce, which some analysts argue could hinder the government's ability to effectively serve the public. The administration's approach has raised alarm within public health agencies. 2. Workers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes of Health are reportedly facing potential layoffs. With the CDC receiving an initial list of over 1,200 employees slated for termination, experts worry about the impact on the agency's capacity to respond to health crises, particularly in the wake of recent global pandemics. Additionally, President Trump is making headlines with plans to implement tariffs on foreign cars, which he indicated might roll out on April 2. This move aligns with his broader strategy to reshape trade policies and could have significant implications for the auto industry, which relies heavily on integrated supply chains across North America and beyond. Industry leaders have voiced concerns that these tariffs could lead to massive job losses and increased costs for consumers. The administration's recent decisions have also extended to educational institutions. Trump has signed an executive order halting federal funding for schools and universities that mandate COVID-19 vaccinations, a policy shift that could affect institutions with existing requirements. While no states currently require vaccinations for K-12 students, the order signifies a broader movement against public health mandates that had gained traction during the pandemic. On the legal front, the Trump administration has faced pushback from various quarters, including federal judges who have ruled against certain actions taken by the administration, such as attempts to limit access to data and personnel records. A recent case highlighted a federal judge's concerns over privacy issues regarding the administration's access to personal information at government agencies, illustrating the tension between the administration's goals and legal safeguards. As the Trump administration continues to navigate these contentious policies, the implications are profound for both immigrant communities and federal employees. The potential impacts on public health, education, and labor markets are significant, and advocates warn that the current trajectory could lead to increased hardship for some of the nation's most vulnerable populations. Looking ahead, the administration's efforts to reshape federal policies will likely face ongoing scrutiny and legal challenges as stakeholders from various sectors seek to protect the rights of individuals and uphold the integrity of government institutions. With further developments anticipated, the coming weeks will be critical in determining the direction of the Trump administration's ambitious and controversial agenda. In the ever-evolving landscape of American politics and social media, the intersection of celebrity finance and digital culture often yields surprising narratives. Recently, former President Donald Trump found himself at the center of controversy after claiming via a post on his Truth Social account that he had secured the endorsement of Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. This assertion, however, was swiftly debunked, showcasing the fragility of trust in the digital age and the potential ramifications of misinformation. On February 14, 2025, Trump shared a post that purportedly highlighted Diamond's endorsement, accompanied by a screenshot from an unnamed news outlet. The post stated, "New, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, has endorsed Trump for president." However, this claim was met with immediate denial from Dimon's spokesperson, who asserted, "Jamie Dimon has not endorsed anyone. He has not endorsed a candidate." The spokesperson's swift rebuttal underscores the importance of clarity in communication, particularly in a political context where endorsements can sway public opinion and voter sentiment. In a further twist, when Trump was confronted about the post during an event in Augusta, Georgia, he distanced himself from the assertion, claiming ignorance and attributing it to someone else's actions. "Somebody put it up, no, I don't know," he said, reiterating that he had no knowledge of the endorsement. This response, alongside the continued presence of the misleading post on his platform, highlights the challenges political figures face in managing their narratives in a rapidly changing media environment. This incident is not isolated, as Trump has faced scrutiny for similar claims in the past. Earlier in 2025, he falsely asserted that singer Taylor Swift had endorsed him, a statement that prompted Swift to publicly clarify her political stance in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris. Swift expressed her concern regarding the dangers of artificial intelligence and misinformation, emphasizing the need for transparency in political discourse. This pattern illustrates a growing trend where political figures leverage social media to advance their narratives, sometimes at the expense of factual accuracy. Moreover, the implications of these misstatements extend beyond mere personal reputation. They reflect a broader issue of misinformation that permeates social media and political communication. The rapid spread of false claims can significantly impact public perception and voter behavior, making it crucial for political figures to engage responsibly with their audiences. In tandem with these developments, Trump's campaign has been characterized by a slew of ambitious promises regarding economic relief, particularly concerning rising costs of essentials like groceries and gas. Following his second inauguration, a fabricated post circulated, allegedly showcasing Trump pledging to cut prices on these items on his first day in office. However, fact-checking revealed that this post never existed on his Truth Social page, highlighting the persistent challenge of separating genuine political rhetoric from manufactured claims. Trump's frequent assertions about slashing consumer prices have resonated with many voters, yet analysts caution that delivering on such promises is fraught with difficulty. Economic experts assert that inflation is driven by a complex interplay of global supply chain disruptions, increased demand, and corporate pricing strategies, making swift price cuts an unrealistic expectation. As the political landscape continues to shift, the role of digital platforms in shaping public discourse cannot be overstated. Trump's foray into the world of memecoins, exemplified by the launch of the $Trump token, raises questions about the future of fundraising and political engagement. Some analysts suggest that such digital assets could serve not only as fundraising tools but also as indicators of political sentiment, offering a new lens through which to gauge public opinion. In conclusion, the convergence of politics, finance, and digital culture presents both opportunities and challenges. Former President Donald Trump is testing the boundaries of executive power as he seeks to reshape the federal government. His administration's recent actions, firing government watchdogs, pushing to eliminate entire agencies, and halting funding for certain programs, have raised alarms among constitutional scholars and political analysts who see echoes of past presidential overreach. Historically, the Watergate scandal catalyzed a bipartisan movement to rein in presidential authority, leading to significant legislative reforms aimed at ensuring government transparency and accountability. As Bruce Schulman, a history professor at Boston University, notes, what we are seeing now is a final campaign, a frontal attack of the last vestiges of that particular post-Nixon historical moment. After President Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974, lawmakers implemented a series of measures designed to curb what they termed the imperial presidency.
These included the establishment of inspectors general in federal agencies,
the creation of the Office of Government Ethics, and new protocols for the use of national emergency powers.
Yet Trump's second term appears poised to challenge these reforms.
According to Andrew Rudalevich, a professor of government at Bowdoin College, these are a bunch of laws that are meant to serve as notice of congressional intent to stand up to presidential overreach. Since taking office, Trump has dismissed over a dozen inspectors general, sidestepping laws mandating cause and congressional notification for such firings. Stanford law professor Joseph O'Connell has stated unequivocally, as the statute is written, what President Trump did violates the law, raising the specter of potential judicial review by a Supreme Court that may be sympathetic to executive power.
Complicating matters further, the Trump administration is reportedly pushing to reinterpret the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which affirms Congress's exclusive authority over federal spending.
Some officials within the administration argue that the law itself is unconstitutional, a stance that has prompted concern even among some conservatives. Gene Healy of the Cato Institute remarked, "I'd like to see a lot of agencies eliminated, but I don't think an effort to do that is going to get very far without Congress." In tandem with these broader themes of executive authority, Trump's approach to public health funding has drawn scrutiny, particularly in light of rising avian flu cases.
Following a series of funding cuts and communication restrictions, public health officials have expressed concern over the administration's capacity to respond effectively to the outbreak. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) had reportedly gone weeks without providing critical updates to state and local health departments, hindering their ability to monitor and manage the situation.
When you add that uncertainty, it plays into what health departments can do when their entire funding situation is at risk, said Adrian Casalati, Chief of Government and Public Affairs for the National Association of County and City Health Officials. The impacts of Trump's governmental overhaul extend beyond immediate health concerns. As egg prices soar due to the avian flu crisis, the lack of clear communication and strategy from the White House has left public health officials scrambling for resources and direction. The administration has yet to articulate a cohesive plan to address the dual challenges of rising prices and potential human health risks associated with the virus. As this unfolding situation continues to evolve, the implications for constitutional governance and public health are profound. The Trump administration's actions could set a precedent for future executives seeking to expand their powers, potentially dismantling decades of safeguards put in place after Watergate. The future of these reforms hangs in the balance as Congress navigates its role in this new political reality. In conclusion, as Trump's administration further tests the limits of executive power, the nation watches closely. The unresolved tensions between the executive branch and Congress may shape not only the trajectory of American governance but also the effectiveness of responses to pressing public health crises. As history has shown, the outcomes of these political battles will resonate long after the current administration has left office, making it imperative for lawmakers and citizens alike to remain vigilant in defending constitutional principles. On January 2, 1988, a pivotal moment in North American economic history occurred when U.S. President Ronald Reagan and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney signed a free trade agreement that eliminated tariffs on goods and services flowing between the two nations. While the deal was celebrated in the U.S., it sparked fears in Canada about the potential erosion of political independence. Critics, including Liberal leader John Turner, warned that the agreement could reduce Canada to a mere colony of the United States as economic ties grew stronger and political autonomy weakened. Fast forward 36 years and those concerns have resurfaced with renewed vigor amid the tumultuous presidency of Donald Trump. His administration's threats to impose heavy tariffs and make Canada the 51st state have galvanized public opinion in Canada, prompting a backlash against its economic dependency on U.S. markets. Current polls indicate that Canadians are largely opposed to annexation and are increasingly open to measures that would reinforce their national sovereignty. The economic statistics tell a compelling story. When the original trade deal was signed, approximately 75% of Canadian exports flowed to the US. Today that figure has crept up to 80%. This dramatic increase underscores the depth of Canada's reliance on its southern neighbour, especially as trade has expanded from roughly one-third to two-thirds of the Canadian economy over the past century.
The prospect of Trump following through on a threatened 25% tariff could plunge Canada into recession, illustrating just how precarious its economic position has become.
Historically, Canada has grappled with its proximity to the US, facing the gravitational pull of its larger neighbor. This dynamic has persisted since the country's inception, with early leaders like Sir John A. Macdonald constructing infrastructure intended to foster independence. The post-World War II era saw Canada negotiating trade agreements like the Auto Pact in 1965, but attempts to reduce economic dependence, such as Pierre Trudeau's National Energy Program, have often met with resistance from regional stakeholders.
As Trump's administration enters its second term, uncertainty looms large, with his recent actions signaling a potential escalation in trade tensions.
His administration has proposed tariffs on all foreign trading partners, a move that experts warn could instigate a trade war and destabilize the global economy. Economists like Gary Clyde Huffbauer from the Peterson Institute for International Economics predict that Trump's redefinition of reciprocity in trade negotiations could result in average U.S. tariffs rising by 10 to 15 percentage points, ultimately harming the American economy while raising costs for consumers.
Amidst the chaos, Canadian leaders have vowed to push back against these threats. Premiers have expressed readiness to dismantle internal trade barriers, and the federal government has indicated plans for retaliatory tariffs.
Notably, even figures like former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper have acknowledged the need for Canada to make sacrifices to preserve its national independence. However, the path forward is fraught with challenges. Canada lacks the infrastructure necessary to pivot its exports quickly to alternative markets should the U.S. reduce its demand. For instance, the logistical framework for transporting goods like aluminum or crude oil is heavily oriented toward American consumption.
This has left Canadian officials scrambling to recalibrate trade relationships that have been built over decades.
The political landscape in Canada is also shifting. With an election on the horizon, the unpopularity of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has opened the door for Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Although the emergence of former central banker Mark Carney as a potential Liberal candidate complicates the scenario, both leaders are promising to confront Trump's threats and strengthen Canada's economic resilience, indicating a shift in national priorities that could redefine the country's future trajectory. As the narrative unfolds, it appears that the fear of economic annexation has acted as a catalyst for Canadians, prompting a reassessment of their relationship with their largest trading partner. In the face of adversity, Canada finds itself at a crossroads, poised to either reinforce its independence or further entrench itself within the U.S. economic orbit. The coming months will be critical not just for Canada but for the broader North American economic landscape as it grapples with the implications of a potentially volatile trade environment. In a significant development at the Munich Security Conference, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky articulated his country's demand for security guarantees as a precondition for any negotiations to end the ongoing war with Russia. This statement came during a crucial meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who was representing the Trump administration's renewed diplomatic efforts to seek a swift resolution to the conflict. Zelensky's remarks underscore the precarious situation Ukraine finds itself in as it navigates the complexities of international diplomacy amid a protracted war that has already claimed countless lives. Zelensky emphasized the importance of security assurances, particularly in light of Ukraine's exclusion from NATO membership. He expressed concern that Russian President Vladimir Putin may be positioning himself for further aggression against both Ukraine and the broader NATO alliance in the upcoming year.
"We want peace very much," Zelensky stated, adding, "but we need real security guarantees. This sentiment reflects the Ukrainian leadership's deep-seated apprehension about Russia's intentions and the potential for future conflicts if assurances are not established. The meeting, lasting approximately 40 minutes, did not yield any concrete announcements regarding a path to peace. Vance reiterated the Trump administration's commitment to achieving a lasting resolution, emphasizing that the goal is to halt the violence and prevent a resurgence of conflict in Eastern Europe. "We want the killings to stop. Not the kind of peace that's going to have Eastern Europe in conflict just a couple of years down the road," he asserted. The backdrop to this diplomatic engagement is a recent shift in U.S. foreign policy under President Trump, who has signaled a desire to negotiate directly with Putin to facilitate a peace deal. This approach has raised concerns among European allies, who fear that a rapid resolution might come at the expense of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Trump's suggestion that any agreement may require Ukraine to cede territory seized by Russia since 2014 has left many in Kyiv wary of the implications for their sovereignty. Complicating matters further, a drone strike on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant earlier that day was perceived by Zelensky as a very clear greeting from Putin to the international community gathered in Munich. While the incident did not result in increased radiation levels, it served as a stark reminder of the ongoing tensions and the potential for escalation. In addition to the talks with Zelensky, Vance met with other European leaders, including Germany's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, to discuss broader security concerns. His addresses at the conference highlighted a dual focus on reinforcing defense spending among NATO nations and addressing internal European challenges such as illegal migration and the perceived erosion of fundamental values. European leaders have expressed growing alarm over the United States' shifting security priorities, particularly in light of Trump's administration's intent to reduce military aid to Ukraine. The backdrop of increasing military support from European nations, which collectively have provided around $60 billion in assistance since the conflict began, contrasts sharply with Trump's more isolationist rhetoric. Looking ahead, the future of Ukraine's NATO aspirations remains uncertain, especially as Trump continues to express skepticism about its feasibility. This has prompted European nations, particularly Britain and France, to explore independent measures, including the potential deployment of troops to Ukraine to help enforce any future peace agreement. As the geopolitical landscape evolves, Zelensky's insistence on security guarantees signals that Ukraine is determined to safeguard its sovereignty and prevent further encroachments by Russia. The implications of these discussions are profound, not only for Ukraine but for the stability of Europe as a whole, as leaders grapple with the challenge of maintaining security in an increasingly unpredictable global environment. The coming weeks will be critical as the international community watches closely for developments in the negotiations, which hold the potential to reshape the future of Eastern Europe. In a world increasingly marked by complex geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainties, the diplomatic strategies of leaders can significantly alter the landscape of international relations. As the Trump administration re-engages with key issues such as the Russo-Ukrainian war and ongoing tensions in the Middle East, analysts are observing a shift in the dynamics of American diplomacy. Recent discussions, particularly at the Munich Security Conference, have raised alarms among European diplomats regarding what they perceive as an unsettling approach characterized by a willingness to concede significant leverage to adversaries like Russia. The crux of the concern stems from Vice President J.D. Vance's and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's statements during the conference, which some European officials interpreted as a form of appeasement. Kaja Kallas, the European Union's chief foreign policy official, expressed her dismay, stating it's appeasement. It has never worked. This sentiment reflects a broader anxiety that the Trump administration may prioritize rapid negotiations over the long-term security of Ukraine, potentially sacrificing the country's territorial integrity in the process. The backdrop of these discussions is the U.S. national debt, which has ballooned to an astounding $36 trillion, raising questions about the sustainability of America's military commitments abroad, making the pursuit of a strong diplomatic stance even more precarious. The administration's strategy towards Ukraine reflects these complexities.
As European leaders grapple with the implications of a potential ceasefire, they are increasingly wary of Trump's approach. Many fear that a rushed agreement could allow Russia to regroup and strengthen its military capabilities, posing a renewed threat not just to Ukraine but to broader regional stability. The disarray evident in the U.S. delegation's messaging at the Munich conference, where contradictory statements left many allies confused, underscores the challenges facing American diplomacy. Meanwhile, Trump's administration appears to be adopting a transactional approach to foreign policy, prioritizing immediate gains over long-term commitments.
This big stick diplomacy, reminiscent of Theodore Roosevelt's famous adage,
has been reinterpreted in Trump's context as an approach where the loudness of threats may overshadow the necessary subtleties of negotiation.
Analysts suggest that the administration's focus on short-term outcomes could jeopardize America's credibility and influence in the long run.
The implications extend beyond Europe to other regions such as the Middle East, where Trump's handling of the Gaza ceasefire has drawn criticism for perceived amateurism. His administration's reliance on threats rather than diplomacy has raised questions among seasoned diplomats about the effectiveness of such an approach in fostering sustainable peace. As the Trump administration navigates these intricate geopolitical waters, the responses from European allies and other global partners will be crucial. There is a growing consensus among European leaders that Ukraine must be included in any negotiations concerning its future, emphasizing the need for collaboration rather than unilateral decision-making by the U.S. This evolving landscape suggests that while Trump's administration seeks to assert American power, the realities of interdependence and the necessity of strategic alliances will play an increasingly vital role in shaping the outcomes of its foreign policy initiatives. Looking ahead, the effectiveness of Trump's diplomatic strategies will likely be tested against the backdrop of rising global tensions and economic constraints. As leaders on both sides of the Atlantic brace for what may be a turbulent period, the balance between assertiveness and cooperation will be pivotal in determining the future of international relations. The unfolding situation in Ukraine, coupled with the broader implications for U.S. foreign policy, will continue to capture the attention of global observers as they gauge the potential impact on peace and stability in a rapidly changing world.